The moment I see asphalt, I'm just gone.
The lure of the asphalt. New Zealand netball from grass paddocks to world hardcourt champions.
They have a thing in netball called a chest pass, right? And I used to get them in the face.
I just wanted to know that she respects the game of netball.
What even is netball?
Harrison, you are a freak!
This is the sport evolving at its very best. Unbelievable. Can you believe it?
It's all over!
New Zealand have won the World Cup!
New Zealand netball stand tall!
Kia ora, nau mai ki te hōtaka o tēnei te pōro Kiwi. Given there's no netball at any level at the moment because of this blasted coronavirus, we decided to take a step back in time, and I'm all for reminiscing. So to help me do that, I have former Silver Ferns legend Sandra and Joan Hodson dialing in, and former sports journalist Jane Hunt, and we're going to talk the 1991 Netball World Cup. Kia ora, everyone.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
So we're all in lockdown. Joan, the last time we talked, netball trials at your high school were done and dusted, now on hold. Pretty gutting for those players. It's a pretty big deal at their age, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, but like everyone else in lockdown, it's just the way it goes.
Sandra, I believe you stepped down as assistant pulse coach at the end of last year, but you've still got some involvement as a specialist coach. How are the spirits?
Well, it's been a while.
Yeah.
We've actually been there, to be honest. But building up into the season, obviously they've had their first game, but we haven't been together following that game. And the Pulse, they had a great start. Yeah, just a shame that we couldn't get that continuity, but we all know the reason why.
Mm. And Jane Hunt, you're also involved with The Zone as a media manager. How are you going?
Yes, all good, thanks. There's been several sort of interviews requests for the Pulse players, just as the media finds things to fill the gap. And realistically, all the players want to do is play, but they're very mindful that this is a bigger picture and more about them, and they're just concerned about everyone's health and well-being, really.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to look at the 1991 Netball World Championship in Sydney. It's considered to have taken the sport to the next level, and the Silver Ferns played a major role in that, along with Australia. No surprises there. It was the first time the tournament actually had a final, having previously been a round-robin format. So I hope this isn't too painful for my guests, but I've got a little bit of commentary I'd like to play.
Sports World 91, while the All Black World Cup campaign is still some time away, the World Netball Tournament came to an end in Sydney last night. In pool play, New Zealand and Australia were a class above the rest, with Jamaica not too far behind. So last night in the final, New Zealand and Australia lined up against each other to play for the World Championship. This report from Andrea Estrada.
New Zealand has to break this pass. They've got less than 30 seconds to do it. They're down 53-52. They have to break this pass. Less than 30 seconds. Australia have it. Simone McInnes, Australia will defend it. Hardy has the ball. Intercept. Oh, it's all down the back of the court. But no, it's gone out. It's rolled away. Rosalie Jenkins now Australia in position. Australia just need to hold on to the ball. 53-52. It's going to be too late for the Kiwis. Australia now with the pass. It's going to be too late for the Kiwis. It's all over. It's all over. Australia have won 53-52. New Zealand managed to stay that one goal ahead of them that whole way. Australia are the new World Netball Champions.
Was anyone expecting such a close game?
Yes. Yes, I think so. It was close all the way. And I didn't play the semi-final, but you did, Sandy?
Yep, the semi-final against England.
Jamaica?
You guys played England in the semi. I think you beat them by 20 goals.
Correct, 53-33. We'd played Jamaica earlier on in the tournament, and I was really quite amazed because it was a very, very high-scoring score at 68-63, which is pretty massive for those days, and very attacking high score. But so it was England in the semi, according to my notes.
Yeah. I guess the 12 months leading up to that, had the results between New Zealand and Australia been pretty neck and neck?
Well, actually, no. Australia they were leading the way there. And that year, in 1989, we had a really successful year. In fact, we didn't lose. We had a series against Australia earlier in the year, quite close scores, but actually in the last game, we won by 12. And then we went to the World Games in 89, that was Karlsruhe in Germany, and we beat Australia there. So I think Lynn had taken over by that stage as coach, so that was just this wicked, start to the next era, if you like. And then in 1990, we had a Jamaica-Australia tri-series, and Australia won 2 of those games. In fact, in the last game, they beat us by 12 goals. So it wasn't, we weren't on top at that stage. Australia certainly got the better of us that year.
Jane, you were in Sydney covering the game. Who were you working for then? Was it NZPA?
Yes, that's correct.
Did you have a good position? Were you up in the media box?
I think we were, from memory, on the sideline, I think, still in those days. And I'm not sure if it was my first overseas assignment or not. If not, it was pretty close. I'd covered netball at home, and just the size of the crowd and the noise and the hype. And I think those sort of games, bounce of the ball, umpire's call, missed goal, it just was kind of anyone's game. But, we would go one way or the other. You thought the Silver Ferns had it, then Aussie would get the ball back. So one of those hard ones to pick.
Yeah. The final is often described as one of the greatest games in the history of the sport. Joan, did you know it at the time that that game was a pretty big deal?
Oh, when it was down to the wire, yeah. It was, for me, really nerve-wracking because I hadn't really played many games during that tournament. But, yeah, I had replaced Anna Norval, who was playing at wing attack.
We've got a little bit of post-match audio. So it was the 3rd World Championship win for Australian coach Joyce Brown, and she said it was her team's hunger and desire to win that got them there.
They threw their heart into it and their body followed and stretched the extra inch, and that's what does it. That makes the difference between very good players and champions, and these are champions.
Both coaches agreed the result was just a matter of when the final whistle blew, and Lynn Parker admitted her team was found lacking that special ingredient in the dying moments.
A little bit of experience, really, and the opposition that we didn't quite have, and just that little bit of knowing how to win the game at the right time, and we knew that we've been lacking that all the way along, and we nearly got there with it.
So Lynn Parker with her initial reaction. Sandra, what was the dressing room like after? Do you remember?
Well, I think didn't Y win the night with her speech, and it was an epic game. And I that the noise. I mean, in 1987 we played outside in Glasgow in Scotland in the rain, kind of thing. But that game, that was our 11th game of the tournament, and obviously Aussie on home soil. I think when you're in those tournaments, Joan can probably back me up, you just want to win. You've worked hard for it. You've got through 10 games. This is the final. You try and keep calm and get the job done. We were ahead by 1 at the end of every quarter, and obviously to lose by 1 at the end, when it really mattered. I think when you look at games, you look at yourself, and I think, geez, I could have done better. There were individuals. I thought Joan was sharp. I thought she had a really good game. The defenders did well. I think just put it down to probably what Lynn said, although I never felt that we were really firing, if you like, really firing through the game. I felt it was sort of status quo and we couldn't quite get ahead, and definitely that critical moment, or those critical moments, particularly at the end. We knew that we were in a massive match. We were in it, but probably, as Lynn said, we just couldn't finish it, or we didn't finish it off. And, what was the mood in the, I don't know, Joan, can you remember what the mood in the...
Yeah, I do. Because at the end of the game, I had to deliver a stereo. I had a stereo that got taken somewhere, and we had bought a new one, and I'd borrowed it off my sister, and so straight after the game...
Did you have a ghetto blaster?
And straight after the game, I had to go and take it to her. So, yeah, that was straight after the game. Delivered it to her, and then I went back to the changing rooms, and oh my gosh, it was like, you know, someone had died. It was so quiet, just really quiet. It was it was such a hard-fought match, and it was so close, and you know, still the adrenaline was pumping, but yeah, there were odd little bits of clusters in the room when I got back, and it was pretty quiet. It was deathly, really. But it was a fantastic game to be part of. I was just buzzing from that, really.
The noise was incredible, wasn't it? It was just intense, and I must, I put my hand up and say I probably could have dealt with that a bit better. You know, again, at the end of the tournament, and you're just a little bit fatigued, and to have to handle that noise and the intensity and the closeness and all of that, jeepers, it was, one to remember for sure.
So the crowd was 10,000. Would you have played in front of anything like that before then?
No, I don't, Joan, again, I can't remember. I mean, in New Zealand, I'm pretty sure that the biggest venues in New Zealand at that time might have been 3,500.
That's right.
I've been making it up a bit here. Some of those Aussie stadiums were a bit bigger, but I again can't remember it ever being at capacity. And I'm sure the fact that it was, so close the whole time, and it was, in Aussie, in Sydney, and it just couldn't get any more intense, really.
You're right about the noise, Sandy, because that's, I think that was my role when I got on the court, was just yelling and trying to, just keep that connection with everybody. And I just remember I was shouting at, freaking nobody, really, because
you did a good job.
It was so loud. You're right.
Yeah.
Jane, do you remember interviewing players afterwards? Was it quite a tussle trying to, was there a bit of a media scrum there?
I have a vivid memory of Louisa Wall, who was at that time a very young player, and now, as most would know, a member of Parliament. But she was just absolutely distraught, because I think in the latter stages of the game, she threw a pass that got intercepted, I think, and thought that she had, it was all her fault. And I said to her, these things happen in sport and you'll get another go. But she was more worried. She said, but why won't? So she was really affected by it.
Yeah.
And just from what Sandy said earlier, and it was talked about for years to come afterwards, Wise speech afterwards was probably still stands as one of the most humble and heartfelt after-match speeches that you'll ever hear. And it was all kind of live at the time, in front of the audience, in front of TV, and it was just brilliant. It was kind of probably an old cliche now, but with it ending with netball was the winner, but just the way she spoke and everything. The New Zealanders won lots of accolades for that little act.
Yeah, I mean, I was 15 years old at the time. I can still remember watching the game, me and my parents in the lounge shouting at the TV. It was my first memory of really being on the edge of my seat, and it was feeling, it was unbearable, really, to kind of watch those last 2 minutes. I mean, I can't believe I still remember this. I specifically remember her saying the words, without wanting to sound corny, netball won. And that line has always stuck in my head, and I don't think anyone could accuse Wai of being corny. And I think that's the first time I've ever heard a sports person say that sport won on the day. And, everyone says it now. Yeah, that really stuck in my head. We've actually got some audio from a couple of players, including Wai after the match. A couple of Silver Ferns were interviewed. Let's take a listen.
This World Tournament was the swan song for both the New Zealand captain and vice-captain, Waimarama Taumanu and Sandra Edge. After 10 years in the national side, Taumanu's retiring. She says the World Championship loss wasn't a bad note to go out on because the team played so well, and she wasn't feeling sad about the end of her international career.
No, I'm not even that. I think I'm just tired. You know, it's been a really intense 2 weeks, and mental pressures are off now, and I guess that's how I'm feeling at the moment.
Edge is off overseas. It's the second time she's stepped down from the international scene, but she says this time she feels a lot happier about it.
It's really good to have come back. I didn't, even though we lost tonight, it's still a good thing. It's a neat time for me to finish now. I feel really neat about the game. I've had a neat 7 years, so it's good.
So little did you know at the time, Sandra, that you would actually come out of retirement and play in the next World Champs in 1995.
Yeah. I kind of look back and think after 87, the World Championship in 87, I just played. I didn't put too much thought into it. I just worked hard. I played hard. I enjoyed the environment. Didn't have to think. We had, excellent management team. We had excellent leaders. We had good experience, and so you just did your bit, really. So come 91, I still think I could have done a better leadership job at that stage. And back in those days, and Joan was a phys ed teacher, you were working full time. We were heavily involved in club netball. I think I'd moved to Auckland by that stage, but prior to that, player coach of a club. The violins are coming out now. The violins are coming out. Oh, poor old Sandy, pretty full on, and your training, and we were good trainers, I reckon. Back then, I really felt like we were professional amateurs. We worked really hard, and you have other things in your life, and when they go a bit haywire, it kind of throws you a bit, and you're managing requests to go and do things in the community, and you're just juggling so many balls. Anyway, so 91, I said I was happy at the time, and actually interesting, I heard why say it was a gruelling couple of weeks. And what was that like?
She sounded really drained.
11 games, we were. I think I played like that too. I think Joan definitely brought the energy down, down in the attacking end for sure. But, so after 91, I did go overseas, potted around, went back playing. I was in Auckland by then, playing for ASB Collegiate with Joan and Yvonne and Jan London coaching, and, just got heavily back into it again. And next minute, 94, 95.
And you mentioned there you've truly felt like a semi-professional. You worked really hard. When I was researching for this, I did find some video of that grand final, and I was quite surprised. We're going about the physicality of the game now and players taking knocks. You guys took some knocks in too.
Oh, so butting in again.
Go for it.
I felt, and it was probably a good tactic, really, to wear us down. I felt that was probably the most physical game I'd had. I don't think it shows that much on the clip. And give Carissa Dell with the, some cred. So it was very one-on-one. Every time you took the ball, you had a smack over the head. That's what it felt like anyway. Well, it was, but...
it would have been.
I just remember Sandy in that whole game piggybacking Simone McInnes the whole game. I just... couldn't get over how physical they were and were allowed to get away with it at that stage. And I think that's what took me into the whole umpiring circle, because I just felt that they were just on us the whole time.
Wow. Would it have been neutral umpires back then?
It was.
Savage. Mamia Savage was from the Cook Islands, and
the English umpire.
Yeah. Also listening to that little clip from Why, little did she know that she would actually be coaching the Silver Ferns 24 years later at the 2015 Netball World Cup in the same city. So the circle keeps going. There's just one final clip. I mostly want to play it for the retro music sting.
So the New Zealand netballers will arrive home today without the world title they won in Glasgow in 1987, but they can still hold their heads high. And by the glimmer in the eye of Lynn Parker at the mention of Birmingham in 4 years, I'd say she'll be back to fight another day.
That report from Andrea Estrada, the highs and lows of international sport. You're with Sports World with Radio New Zealand Sport.
In fact, it wasn't Lynn Parker who led the team in 1995. Lee Gibbs became the Silver Ferns' sixth coach when appointed to lead the team in 1994. So, 1991 Netball World Cup, Jamaica beat England in the playoff for third and fourth. Can anyone guess who came fifth?
Cook Islands?
Yeah, one of the Pacific teams.
Yeah, Cook Islands. Can you guess who they beat? Who came sixth?
Can't have been Jamaica? No.
Canada.
Canada, that's... Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they haven't even been at the World Cup for the last 2 or 3 cycles, have they? So it shows how the world netball strength is changing. And back in 1991, there would have been no Uganda, no Malawi, no South Africa, because they were still out in the cold, I believe. So, yeah, it's interesting how things have changed.
Well, yeah.
Pacific countries were really strong in those days, and as you say, recent times, it's the African nations. And they've probably climbed above the Caribbean.
It's like they've replaced them, and they're now the second tier, biting at the heels of the top 4.
Definitely.
Just take a quick look at who were the players on court in that grand final. Tracy Earle at goal shoot, Julie Carter goal attack, Joan Yu at wing attack, Sandra Yu at centre, wing defence Lewis Wall, goal defence Waitamonu, goal keep Robin Dillamore. For the Australian side, goal shoot Vicky Wilson, she's probably at her peak at that time. Goal attack Katrina Wagg, wing attack Shelley O'Donnell, one of the best Australia's ever produced. Centre Carissa Dalwood, wing defence Simone McInnes, goal defence Michelle Falke, and goal keep Rosalie Jenke. It's just interesting seeing at least 3 to 4 of those. Like you've got Vicky Wilson, Simone McInnes, and Rosalie Jenke have gone a long way in their coaching careers. Sandra, you would have had a lot of good battles with Carissa Dalwood over the years.
Yeah. Started off playing against Jill McIntosh.
Oh, did you?
Yep. So Jill, and then Marcia Ella, and then Carissa Dalwood. Yeah, there's a couple in between, but So Carissa was probably at the peak of hers too in 91.
Fun fact, if that game was tied in Sydney, it would have gone to 5 minutes each way extra time, and if it was still tied, time wouldn't be called. They would have played on, and the first goal scored will win. So that was before it went to you have to win by 2 goals in the double overtime. I mean, it would have been pretty cruel to go into that kind of extra time and to only have one team win by 1. Joan or Sandra, going into the 1991 was the first time we had the finals format. Were you excited about the prospect of a grand final?
Yeah, I can just remember some of the games at 91, because we had games against Hong Kong just leading up to that. So I played most of those kind of games, and I played the real big games at that time. Sandy, you would have played all of them, eh, babe?
Well, I know I was a bit tired at the end. Hey, I was just looking at some of the scores too, and it's like, against Hong Kong, you must have played good, Joan, because 104-14.
That's right, we were the Centurions.
Yep, Papua New Guinea 91-29, Northern Ireland 93-21, so you must have done good. So it was just such a demanding schedule, really, and you do have to concentrate one after the other. I think Jamaica was a big game. Like that was, we only won that by 5, so that was.
Oh, that was epic. That was such a good game, man.
Yep. And, you're just ticking off the whole time. So.
Yeah, because Aussie had to play Jamaica, didn't they?
In the semi, and there was only about 6 goals in it. Jane, it was the first time the event was televised live in Australia, and the media coverage during the event was different to those that came before it. You had TV replays as well, and it would have been beamed into New Zealand homes at the prime TV viewing. Is that a big reason why this tournament really took netball to another level?
Yes, I think so. And it was also, like I always refer to the 90s, as if you've ever been involved in media, the 90s were by far and away the halcyon days, I think, because at that it was still free-to-air television, so it would have been on TVNZ, and from New Zealand and Sydney, I think from memory, you would have had newspaper-wise, Christchurch Press, Dominion, New Zealand Herald, NZPA, radio, yourselves, Radio New Zealand, plus TV. So it was just, there was kind of wall-to-wall coverage across all mediums. And yeah, it just lifted it kind of like they say that netball in New Zealand reached, went into maturity when it went into the 60s and 7-a-side, but I think the early 90s and that World Champs took it another level higher.
TV was kind of the game changer.
Yeah. And as Sandy said, the year before they'd been beaten by Australia by about 12 goals. So to come that close against them at home, and netball's always, the Silver Ferns have always had a strong following, and because it was made available to so many people to see it, I do think there probably was a lot of feedback, yeah.
Joan, do you remember what the reception was like when you got home?
I think we just continued on, and we had our National Bank, representative stuff that we went into when we got home. But I just remember that in New Zealand, a couple of years before that, we were leading the way with, TV, and the popularity here was incredible because we had the Milo series. And, the Aussies always used to talk about coming over here where they got a lot of coverage that they didn't get back home.
Right.
So
in some ways that tournament was more important for Australia, possibly, than it was for us because we already had pretty good coverage.
Yeah, even then, here in New Zealand, we all knew who the Aussie team was, but when they travelled over here, and they had a bigger following here than they did back at home.
I found a quote from Anne Sargent. She actually commentated that grand final. She'd recently retired as Australian captain, and on later reflecting on the tournament, she said, "Netball reached a broader audience in 1991. That final was exciting, and netball reached another dimension that day. I went over that final game for the next 6 months. The public was talking about it in pubs and clubs everywhere. It had a huge impact." So the fact that it really gripped the Australian sporting public, at the end of the day, that has been good for the rivalry between the two countries.
Yeah, absolutely. It was amazing.
Sandra, any final thoughts?
Just my recollection was really positive, even though we came runners-up. I think everyone appreciated it, and I think, Wai's address at the end, I think the respect that the team got, through her and how she articulated how she felt and the game, I think, people were pretty proud overall, but still devastating. Still didn't change anything.
Yeah, and I guess you really set a trend there in 1991 because I think there's been maybe 2 or 3 grand finals since then that's come down to 1 goal. So you set the trend. Okay, thanks so much to my guests, former Silver Ferns Joan Hodson and Sandra Edge, and former sports journalist Jane Hunt. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed tripping down memory lane with you guys.
Thanks, Bridget.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Bridget.